I buried my brother 40 years ago. His name was Wesley. We called him Wes. He was 18 when the Greyhound bus he was riding went off Interstate 35 near Waco during a January ice storm in 1985. They told me 16 passengers died that night. Wesley was one of them. I identified his body at the morgue in Temple, Texas. I was 25 years old, fresh out of the Navy, and I had to tell our mother that her youngest son was gone. My name is Marshall Davis. I'm 65 now, and it's 2025. Last Tuesday, my phone rang at 2 o'clock in the morning. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was 214, Dallas. At my age, you learn that nothing good comes from calls at that hour. But something made me reach for it. Maybe it was the same instinct that used to wake me when Wesley had nightmares as a kid after Dad died in that refinery accident. Marshall? Is this Marshall Davis? The voice was uncertain, rough, like someone who hadn't spoken in a very long time. But underneath that roughness, there was something that made my blood run cold. "Who is this?" I asked, sitting up in bed, heavy breathing on the other end. "It's me," the voice said. "It's Wesley." I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up again. When I did, the line was still open. I could hear him breathing. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice cracking. "Whoever you are, this is sick. My brother died 40 years ago." "I know," the voice said. "I know how long it's been. I just figured out who I am. I found something, a newspaper clipping about the bus crash. There's a picture of me, but the name under it says Wesley Davis." "That's me, isn't it?" "I'm Wesley Davis." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "Where are you?" I don't really know. A place called Deep Ellum. Someone told me that's what it's called. I've been here a long time. I think I live in a shelter on Elm Street. But I don't remember. I don't remember how I got here. I don't remember anything before about 15 years ago. Just waking up in a hospital, and they said I'd been found beaten up somewhere, and I didn't have any ID, and I couldn't tell them my name. My mind was racing. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of scam. Someone who'd found Wesley's name somewhere and decided to torture me with it. "What do you remember?" I asked, testing him. "Nothing clear, just feelings. Sometimes I dream about ice storms, about being cold, about people screaming. And sometimes I dream about a house with a red barn, and someone used to make pancakes with pecans. Every Sunday morning. I felt the tears start then, hot and sudden, because I remembered that red barn behind our house outside San Antonio. I remembered Mom making those pecan pancakes every Sunday morning without fail, and Wesley always ate twice as many as anyone else. "What do you look like?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Old," he said, and there was something like sadness in his voice, really old. My face is, I don't know how to describe it. Weathered, I guess. I've lived rough for a long time, but I found this picture in the newspaper from the accident, and even though it's 40 years old, I can see it. I can see myself in that face. Wesley had a scar. I said it before I could stop myself. On his left forearm from when he crashed his motorcycle when he was 13, 8 stitches. There was a long pause. Then, "I have a scar on my left forearm. It's old, really old. I never knew where it came from." I was crying now, really crying in a way I hadn't cried since the day we buried him. "Give me your address," I said. "I'm coming to get you." "I don't think you should," he said quietly. "I don't think I'm the person you remember. I don't remember being him. I'm just someone who's been living on the streets for longer than I can recall. I probably smell bad. I probably look scary. I just wanted to call because I thought someone should know that maybe I didn't die in that crash, that maybe there was a mistake." "Tell me where you are," I said firmly, "right now." He gave me the address of a shelter on Elm Street in Dallas. I wrote it down with shaking hands. It was about 3.5 hours from my place in Austin, longer if the roads were bad. "Stay there," I said. "Don't go anywhere. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there by 7 at the latest. Do you understand? Don't leave." "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, Marshall. I'll wait." The line went dead. I sat there in the darkness of my bedroom for maybe 30 seconds, trying to process what had just happened. Then I was moving, pulling on clothes, grabbing my wallet and keys. My wife Brooke stirred in bed. "Marshall, what's wrong?" "I have to go to Dallas," I said, and my voice sounded strange, disconnected. Now? At 2 o'clock in the morning? Marshall, what's happened? I looked at her. This woman I'd been married to for 38 years, and I didn't know how to say it. How do you tell someone that the brother you buried 4 decades ago just called you on the phone? I'll explain later, I said. I have to go. I'm sorry. I was out the door before she could ask any more questions. The drive to Dallas was the longest 3.5 hours of my life. I kept the radio off because I couldn't stand the noise. My mind was spinning with possibilities, with impossibilities. Part of me was convinced this was a cruel hoax, that I'd get there and find some con artist who'd somehow learned details about Wesley's life. But another part of me, the part that had never fully accepted that my little brother was gone, was screaming that it was real. I thought about that day in the morgue. I was 25 years old, barely more than a kid myself, and they'd pulled back the sheet to show me a face that was battered and swollen from the crash. The body had been in the cold for 10 hours before they recovered it from the wreckage. There was a gash across the forehead, bruising everywhere. But I'd looked at the shape of the face, the color of the hair, the build of the body, and I'd said yes. Yes, that's my brother. That's Wesley Davis. What if I'd been wrong? What if in my shock and grief I'd identified the wrong body? The possibility made me feel sick, because if that was true, then Wesley had been alive all this time, alive and suffering, alone, not knowing who he was, while I'd moved on with my life, while I'd married Brooke, had kids, built a career at the refinery, celebrated birthdays and Christmases and anniversaries, while Mom had died 8 years ago, still grieving for her youngest son. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The memories came flooding back as I drove north on I-35, the same highway where it all happened. Wesley at 10 crying when Dad died in that explosion at the Exxon plant. Me promising him we'd take care of Mom together. Wesley at 15, obsessed with the Dallas Cowboys, wearing his Roger Staubach jersey until Mom threatened to burn it if he didn't let her wash it. Wesley at 17, so excited about starting college at A&M, talking about becoming a veterinarian because he couldn't stand to see animals suffer. And Wesley at 18, boarding that damn bus to visit his girlfriend in Oklahoma for the weekend. "See you Sunday night, Marshall," he'd said, punching my arm the way he always did. "Don't eat all of Mom's cornbread while I'm gone." I never saw him again. Or so I thought. The ice storm that killed him had been one of those freaky Texas weather events that nobody saw coming. January 15th, 1985. The temperature had dropped 40 degrees in 3 hours, turning the roads into skating rinks. That Greyhound bus hit a patch of black ice doing 65 and went sideways into a concrete barrier, then rolled down an embankment. The driver lost control so fast that most passengers didn't even have time to brace themselves. 16 people died. Wesley was supposedly one of them. But what if he wasn't? What if in that chaos of twisted metal and broken glass, in the darkness and the freezing rain, a badly injured 18-year-old boy had somehow crawled away from the wreckage? What if he'd been found by the wrong people? People who saw an opportunity in a kid with no memory, no ID, no way to tell anyone who he was. I reached Dallas at 6:30 in the morning. The sun was just coming up, casting long shadows across the downtown skyline. Deep Ellum was exactly as bad as I'd heard, maybe worse. Boarded up buildings, people slumped in doorways, needles on the sidewalk. Graffiti covered every surface. The smell of urine and desperation hung in the air like a fog. This was where my brother had been living. I found the shelter on Elm Street. It was a low, gray building that looked like it had been there forever, wedged between a pawn shop and a vacant lot filled with shopping carts and trash. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner, trying and failing to mask the scent of too many unwashed bodies in too small a space. A woman sat behind a desk near the entrance, maybe 50 years old with tired eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked up as I came in. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," I said. "His name is..." He might not remember his name, but he called me this morning. He said he's been staying here. He would have asked to use a phone around 2 a.m. She studied me for a moment, taking in my clean clothes, my nervous energy, the fact that I clearly didn't belong in this place. Then she nodded slowly. "Wesley." "Yeah, I remember. He was pretty worked up, asked if he could use the phone, said it was an emergency." She paused, her expression softening. "Sweet guy." Wesley's been coming here on and off for about 6 years. Keeps to himself mostly. Never causes trouble. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Is he here now? Check the common room. Through there. She pointed to a door on the left. But go easy on him, okay? Whatever this is about, he's been through enough. I walked toward the door, my legs feeling like they didn't quite work right. My hand was on the doorknob when I realized that everything was about to change. Either I was about to be confronted with the biggest lie anyone had ever told me, or I was about to see my brother for the first time in 40 years. I turned the handle and stepped inside. The common room was a large space with mismatched chairs and tables, a television playing quietly in one corner. There were maybe a dozen people scattered around. Most of them looked up as I entered, their eyes wary, sizing me up. I didn't belong here, and everyone could tell. And then I saw him. He was sitting alone at a table near the window, his back to me. I could see gray hair, longer than it should be, pulled back in a ponytail. He wore a flannel shirt that had seen better days, and his shoulders were hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. I walked toward him slowly. My legs felt like they didn't quite work right. Wesley? He turned around. The face that looked at me was nothing like the face I remembered. This man was weathered and worn, with deep lines around his eyes and mouth. His skin was the kind of brown that comes from years of living outside. There was a scar across his left cheek that hadn't been there before. He looked at least 70, not 58. But the eyes. God, the eyes were the same. Brown with flecks of gold, exactly like our father's eyes. Exactly like Wesley's eyes. "Marshall," he said, and his voice cracked. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him. This man who might be my brother. This ghost from 40 years ago. He stood up slowly, like his joints hurt. He was thinner than Wesley had been, and shorter somehow, though that might just have been the way he held himself. But when he looked at me, there was something in his expression that made my breath catch. Something familiar. Something that reminded me of the kid who used to follow me around the ranch, who always wanted to help with whatever I was doing. "You came," he said. "I wasn't sure you would." "Show me your arm," I said. My voice came out harsh, demanding. "The left one." He hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve. There, running along his forearm, was a scar. Old and faded, but unmistakable. About 3 inches long, right where Wesley's scar had been. The scar from when he'd crashed his motorcycle trying to impress some girl when he was 13. The scar I'd helped clean and bandage while he cried about how much it hurt. I felt my knees go weak. I reached out and grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "I think I need to sit down," I said. He pulled out a chair for me and I collapsed into it. He sat back down across from me, watching me carefully like I might bolt at any moment. Around us, the shelter carried on its morning routine. People shuffled to the coffee station, others watched the morning news on the old television. Nobody paid us any attention. In a place like this, dramatic conversations were probably common. "Tell me about the bus crash," I said. "Tell me what you remember." "I don't remember the crash itself," he said slowly. "But I have nightmares. Always the same. I'm on a bus and it's sleeting, and the driver is trying to slow down but we're sliding, and then people are screaming and it's so cold. So cold I think I might die from it. And then nothing. Just darkness for a long time." He rubbed his face with both hands. The gesture was so familiar it made my chest tight. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in a hospital. A nurse told me I'd been brought in from some oil field near Odessa, that I'd been unconscious. They said I'd been beaten, that someone had robbed me, but I didn't remember that either. I couldn't remember anything. Not my name, not where I was from, nothing. They kept me for 2 days, ran tests, but they couldn't find anything physically wrong with me beyond some old injuries. Head trauma, they said, possibly from years ago. "What year was this?" I asked. 2010, he said. March, I think. I didn't even know what year it was. I had to ask. My mind was racing. 2010. That was 25 years after the crash. What had happened in those 25 years? Where had Wesley been? And before that, I pressed. "You really don't remember anything?" "Sometimes I get flashes," he said. "Little pieces that don't make sense. I remember being cold a lot, living rough somewhere, oil country, maybe West Texas. And I think I remember working manual labor, construction, maybe, getting paid in cash. But it's all foggy, like trying to remember a dream. He looked down at his hands, and I noticed they were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who'd done hard physical work for decades. These weren't the soft hands of the college-bound kid I remembered. For a long time, I didn't even try to remember, he said quietly. I just survived day to day. Found shelters when I could, slept outside when I couldn't. There are gaps in my memory, even from the last 15 years. Sometimes I'd realize weeks had passed and I couldn't account for them. The doctors I've seen, the ones at the free clinics, they said I might have some kind of dissociative disorder, probably from trauma. When did you start trying to remember? I asked. About 4 months ago, he said. I met this woman at the shelter, a volunteer. She was going through boxes of old newspapers, sorting them for recycling, and she showed me one from January 1985, said, "Can you believe this was 40 years ago?" And something about that date made me feel, I don't know, strange, like it meant something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a carefully folded piece of newspaper, yellowed with age. He unfolded the newspaper clipping gently, like it might disintegrate in his hands, and pushed it across the table to me. It was a front-page article about the bus crash. 16 dead in I-35 ice storm tragedy, the headline read. And there, in a small photo grid of the victims, was Wesley's face. Young, smiling, a high school graduation photo that Mom had given to the newspaper. The same photo that had sat on our mantelpiece for 40 years. I looked at that picture for a long time, he said, and something clicked. I knew that face. Not from a mirror. I don't look like that anymore. But from somewhere deep inside, and the name underneath, Wesley Davis. I kept saying it over and over. Wesley, Wes. And it felt right. It felt like my name. I stared at the newspaper clipping, at my brother's young face smiling back at me, the boy who'd been so excited about college, about becoming a vet, about his whole life stretching ahead of him. I started looking for more information, he continued. There's a library near here. The librarian helped me search old records. I found the obituary. I found the list of survivors, family members left behind. Your name was there. Marshall Davis, brother. And there was an address in Austin. It took me 2 months to work up the courage to call. I didn't know if you'd even still be there. I didn't know if you'd believe me. I'm not sure I do believe you, I said, and it came out harsher than I meant it to. I'm not sure I can believe you, because if you're Wesley, then I identified the wrong body. I told our mother the wrong son was dead. Do you understand what that means? He flinched, but he nodded. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I can't imagine what this is like for you. Mom's dead, I said, and I heard my voice break. She died 8 years ago. She spent 32 years thinking you were gone. She never got over it. She kept your room exactly the same until the day she died. Your Cowboys poster, your model airplanes, everything. And if you're really Wesley, then she died not knowing you were alive. The tears were streaming down my face now, and I didn't care who saw. The man across from me, Wesley, maybe Wesley, was crying too, silent tears running down his weathered face. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. We sat there in that shelter common room, 2 old men crying while people walked past and pretended not to notice. This was Dallas, Deep Ellum. Everyone had their own problems. 2 guys having a breakdown was just Tuesday morning. Finally, I wiped my face with my sleeve and looked at him, really looked at him. Tried to see past the weathered skin and the gray hair and the lines that came from decades of hard living. We need to do a DNA test, I said. That's the only way to know for sure. He nodded immediately. Okay. Yes. I want to know too. I need to know. I pulled out my phone and started searching. There was a place in downtown Dallas that did same-day DNA testing. Private lab, expensive, but they could have results in 48 hours. I called them and made an appointment for 1 o'clock that afternoon. Come on, I said, standing up. Let's go get this done. He stood too, moving stiffly. As we walked out of the shelter together, I realized how much shorter he was than me now. Wesley had been almost my height when he died, or when I thought he died. This man was at least 4 inches shorter. But then, years of malnutrition and living rough could do that to a person. Could bend you, make you smaller. We got to my truck, and he stopped. "I haven't been in a car in, I don't remember how long," he said. "It's okay," I said. "We'll take it slow." We drove to the lab in silence. I kept glancing at him in the passenger seat, trying to see my little brother in this weathered stranger. Sometimes I could see it. The shape of his ear, the way he rubbed his thumb against his fingers when he was nervous, a habit Wesley had always had. The way he sat with his shoulders hunched forward, like he was protecting himself from the world. Other times, he looked like a complete stranger, someone I'd never seen before in my life. The DNA lab was in a medical complex downtown, clean and sterile, and nothing like the world he'd been living in. The receptionist gave us a look when we walked in, me in my clean jeans and button-down shirt, him in clothes that had clearly seen better days. But this was a business. They dealt with all kinds of situations: paternity tests, inheritance disputes, family mysteries. The actual test was simple: cheek swabs for both of us, paperwork, payment. I handed over my credit card without looking at the price. The lab technician, a young woman with kind eyes, explained that they'd call me with the results in 48 hours. "These tests are 99.9% accurate," she said. "Whatever question you're trying to answer, this will give you a definitive answer." As we left the lab, I realized I hadn't thought about what came next. It was only noon, and we had 48 hours to wait. 48 hours of not knowing for sure whether this man was my brother or just someone who'd learned enough details to convince me. "Where are you staying tonight?" I asked him as we stood on the sidewalk outside the medical building. "The shelter, I guess." "Same place." I looked at him, at this man who might be my brother, standing on the street corner in clothes that had been worn too many times and shoes that were falling apart. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't just leave him there. "Come on," I said. "I'm getting a hotel room. You're staying with me." "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know. Come on." I found a hotel near the medical district. Got a room with 2 beds. The desk clerk gave us a look, me in my clean clothes and him looking like he'd been living rough. But I didn't care. This was Dallas. They'd seen stranger things. I paid cash and got the key. In the room, I ordered pizza while he took a shower. He was in there for almost 45 minutes. When he came out, his hair was wet and clean, slicked back from his face, and he'd shaved off a patchy beard with the disposable razor the hotel provided. And suddenly, I could see it more clearly. The shape of his face, the set of his jaw, Wesley's jaw. We ate pizza in near silence, the television playing quietly in the background. Some morning talk show with people laughing about things that didn't seem funny anymore. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you," he said. "For this. For not just... for believing me enough to try." "I haven't decided what I believe yet," I said. "But I needed to know one way or another." He nodded. "Can I ask you something?" "What?" "What was I like? Before? When I was Wesley?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I set down my pizza and leaned back against the headboard. "You were good," I said after a moment. "Really good. Kind, you know? You were the kid who always brought home stray dogs, who cried when you saw roadkill on the highway. You wanted to be a veterinarian. You were going to A&M that fall. You were so excited about it." I could see tears forming in his eyes again. "You were funny," I continued, "always making Mom laugh, even when she was having a bad day. You did this thing where you'd imitate the TV preachers and she'd tell you to stop, but she'd be laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. And you were brave. When Dad died in that refinery accident when you were 10, you told me we'd be okay. You said we'd take care of Mom together. And we did." "I wish I could remember," he whispered. "I wish I could remember being that person." "Tell me what you do remember," I said. "About the years after the crash. Help me understand what happened to you." He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. "It's hard," he finally said. "It's like trying to remember a movie you saw when you were drunk. Everything's fuzzy, out of focus." He took a shaky breath. "I remember being cold. That's the strongest memory I have from those early years. Always cold, always hungry. I think I think I was in West Texas somewhere. Oil country. I remember the smell of drilling mud, the sound of machinery running all night. You think you worked on oil rigs? Maybe. Or construction. Building roads, maybe pipelines. I remember my hands always being cut up, always bleeding. And there were other men, always other men who looked as lost as I felt. We lived in trailers, or sometimes just slept in the back of trucks. Got paid in cash every week, but most of it went to whoever was running things. The picture he was painting made me sick. You were being exploited, I guess. But I didn't know any different. I didn't know I had a choice. I couldn't remember having a family or a home or anything else. This was just life. How long did that go on? Years, maybe decades. Like I said, it's all fuzzy. Sometimes I think I tried to leave, tried to get to a city where there might be help, but something always pulled me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was just easier to stay where I was, even if it was bad. He rubbed his forehead, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. The clearest memory I have from that time is getting hurt, really hurt. I fell off something, a rig maybe, or a building we were working on. Hit my head pretty bad. They said I was unconscious for 3 days. When I woke up, even the fuzzy memories I had were mostly gone. That's when whoever was running things decided I was more trouble than I was worth, so they dumped you. In some town near Odessa, just left me at a bus station with $20 and told me to figure it out. That must have been around 2010 because that's when I ended up in that hospital I told you about. I tried to imagine it. My little brother, beaten down by years of exploitation and head trauma, abandoned at a bus station with nothing but the clothes on his back. How did you get to Dallas? Slowly. Over a few years. I'd stay in one place until the police moved me along, then I'd hitchhike or walk to the next town. Always heading east, toward bigger cities where there might be more shelters, more services. I don't know why I chose Dallas. Maybe I just got tired of moving. And you've been there ever since? On and off. Sometimes I'd try other cities, Houston, San Antonio. But Dallas was where I always ended up coming back to. It felt familiar somehow. Like maybe I'd been there before, even though I couldn't remember when. Of course it felt familiar. Wesley had been to Dallas dozens of times as a kid. Cowboys games with Dad before the accident, shopping trips with Mom, the state fair every October. Do you remember anything else from before the crash? He closed his eyes, concentrating. Sometimes I dream about football. Not watching it, but playing it. Being tackled, getting back up. And there's this song, something about a yellow rose. It makes me feel sad, but I don't know why. The Yellow Rose of Texas, I said. Dad used to sing it when he was working in the garage. You'd sing along, even though you couldn't carry a tune to save your life. A small smile crossed his face, the first real smile I'd seen from him. Yeah, I said, feeling my throat tighten. You always said you were going to be famous for your singing someday. Mom would just shake her head and tell you to stick to your plans for veterinary school. We talked for another hour, sharing fragments of memories. Some he remembered, some he didn't, but each little piece that clicked into place felt like another brick being laid in a bridge that had been broken for 40 years. That night, I lay awake in the hotel bed, listening to him breathe in the bed next to mine. Steady, deep breaths, the breathing of someone who'd finally found a safe place to sleep. Every few minutes, though, I'd hear him shift or mumble something, and I wondered what nightmares were playing behind his closed eyes. I thought about calling Brooke, but I didn't know what to say. How do you explain this on the phone? So I sent her a text instead. I'm okay. I'll explain everything when I get home. I love you. She wrote back immediately. I love you too. Be safe. Call when you can. The next day crawled by. We got breakfast at a Waffle House near the hotel. I watched him eat like he hadn't had a real meal in months, which he probably hadn't. He ordered the all-star special, eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast, and a waffle, and cleaned every bite off his plate. When the waitress asked if he wanted more coffee, he looked at me like he was asking permission. It's okay, I told him. Get whatever you want. After breakfast, we drove around Dallas, waiting for the phone to ring. It seemed important somehow to not just sit in the hotel room staring at each other. As we drove past the old Texas Stadium site where the Cowboys used to play, he suddenly spoke up. I remember being here, he said. Not this parking lot, but there was a big building here, and people cheering, really loud cheering. My heart started pounding. Wesley had been obsessed with the Cowboys. I'd taken him to 3 games at Texas Stadium before he died. What else do you remember? Cotton candy, and you spilling mustard on your shirt. You were mad because it was a new shirt. I nearly had to pull over. September 15th, 1984. Cowboys versus the Giants. I'd bought a new Cowboys jersey for the occasion, and I'd spilled mustard from a hot dog all down the front in the first quarter. Wesley had laughed so hard that people around us started laughing too. You bought me a Cowboys pennant, he continued slowly, like the memory was surfacing from deep water. It had Roger Staubach's number on it. Number 12. You hung it on your bedroom wall, I said, my voice barely steady. Right next to your poster of him. Yeah, he said, and smiled. Yeah, I think I did. We spent the afternoon at the Dallas Museum of Natural History. Wesley seemed drawn to the exhibits about animals, especially the ones about wildlife rehabilitation. He stood for a long time in front of a display about injured birds being nursed back to health. I would have liked this job, he said quietly, taking care of things that were hurt. You still could, I said. It's not too late. He looked at me with those brown eyes that were so much like Dad's. I'm 58 years old, Marshall. I can barely read anymore. I haven't been to school since I was 18. It's too late for a lot of things. Maybe. Maybe not. Let's see what happens. The phone rang at 3:15 on Thursday afternoon. We were sitting in the hotel lobby. I'd checked out, planning to start the drive home, but I delayed leaving until we got the call. I answered on the second ring. Hello, Mr. Davis. This is Dr. Amanda Wilson from the Dallas DNA lab. I'm calling with your results. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The man sitting next to me, Wesley, was watching me with wide eyes. Yes, I said. Yes, this is Marshall Davis. The results of your DNA comparison test are conclusive. The probability of siblingship between you and the second party is 99.97%. In other words, Mr. Davis, you are biological brothers. The room tilted. I sat down hard in the lobby chair. You're certain? I asked, though I knew it was a stupid question. Yes, sir. These results are definitive. There's no doubt whatsoever. Would you like me to email you the full report? Yes, please. I gave her my email address, thanked her, and hung up. I looked at my brother who I'd buried 40 years ago, my brother who'd been alive this whole time. It's you, I said. You're really Wesley. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I'm Wesley, he repeated like he was trying to believe it himself. I'm Wesley Davis. And then we were both crying again. And this time I crossed the space between us and pulled him into a hug. He felt so thin, so fragile in my arms. But he was real. He was alive. He was my little brother. We held on to each other for a long time, right there in the hotel lobby. A few people stared, but most just walked around us. This was a business hotel in Dallas. People dealt with their own dramas. Finally, I pulled back and looked at him. Really looked at him. We need to figure out what happened, I said. How you survived the crash. Where you've been all this time. What was done to you. I know someone who might be able to help, Wesley said. There's a doctor at the VA clinic who's been helping me. Dr. Madison Rodriguez. She specializes in trauma cases. She might have some answers. VA clinic? Yeah. They don't ask too many questions about your service record when you're homeless. And she's been trying to help me piece things together. She thinks what happened to me wasn't uncommon, that there are people who prey on folks like me, folks who can't remember who they are. The idea made me sick, but it made sense. Someone had seen a young man with no memory, no identification, no way to call for help, and they'd seen an opportunity. Let's go see her, I said. We drove to the VA clinic in Oak Cliff. Dr. Rodriguez was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had the patient manner of someone who'd heard every story there was to hear, who'd seen every kind of human suffering and still managed to believe that healing was possible. I explained everything. The crash, the identification, the phone call, the DNA test. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. I'd like to examine you if that's all right, Wesley, she said when I finished. He nodded. She had him lie on the examination table and conducted a thorough physical exam. She paid particular attention to old scars and healed fractures. She used a small light to check his eyes, tested his reflexes, felt along his skull with practiced fingers. "You have extensive evidence of old trauma," she said when she was done. "Multiple healed fractures, ribs, left arm, right ankle, significant scarring on your torso and back, and there's a depression in your skull here," she touched the back of his head gently, "consistent with a severe impact injury." "From the bus crash?" I asked. "Possibly. But here's what I think happened based on what you've told me and what I'm seeing." She pulled up a chair and sat down, her expression serious. "I think Wesley did survive the initial crash, but he was badly injured. Head trauma, possibly unconscious. In the chaos and the ice, in the darkness, he was likely thrown from the bus or crawled away from the main wreckage. The other passengers who survived said it was complete chaos, that it was hard to see anything in the storm." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The body you identified, Marshall, I think it was another passenger, someone of similar build and age. In the state the bodies were in after the crash, after being in the cold for hours, with the facial trauma from the impact, it would have been easy to make a mistake, especially for someone who was grieving and in shock. I felt sick." She was right. I knew she was right. At 25, faced with that scene of destruction and death, I'd been looking for my brother. When I saw a body that was roughly the right size, the right hair color, wearing clothes that could have been Wesley's, I'd said yes. I'd said it was him. "So what happened to Wesley?" I asked, my voice hollow. "I think he was found by someone," she said quietly. "Maybe a trucker who stopped to help. Maybe someone from one of the small towns along that highway. But whoever it was, they didn't take him to a hospital, either because they were involved in something illegal themselves or because they saw an opportunity." Wesley was staring at the floor, his hands clenched together. "You have to understand," Dr. Rodriguez continued, "what Wesley looked like in January 1985. An 18-year-old boy, strong, healthy, perfect for manual labor, with severe head trauma that left him with no memory, no identification, no way to tell anyone who he was or where he came from. To certain people, that's not a tragedy, that's a resource." "You think someone kept him?" I asked. "Like a slave?" "I think someone used him," she said. "For labor, most likely. There are operations in remote areas of Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, illegal operations, off-the-books oil field work, ranch labor, construction projects that don't want to deal with regulations or worker protections. They use workers who won't ask questions, won't go to the authorities, workers who don't even know who they are." The picture she was painting made me want to hit something. My little brother, injured and helpless, turned into unpaid labor for decades. "That would explain the gaps in your memory," Dr. Rodriguez said to Wesley. "Years of untreated head trauma, possible additional injuries from dangerous work, malnutrition, exposure to drugs or alcohol as a coping mechanism. Your brain was trying to protect itself by shutting down. The dissociative episodes you've described, those are classic trauma responses." Wesley looked up for the first time since she'd started talking. "So I wasn't crazy? All those times I'd lose days, weeks, that was real?" "Completely real," she said gently. "Your mind was doing what it had to do to survive. It's actually remarkable that you retained as much as you did." "How long do you think this went on?" I asked. "Based on Wesley's physical condition and the timeline he's described, I'd say at least 20 years, maybe 25. These operations, they don't want workers who are getting old, who might have medical problems. Sometime around 2010, when Wesley was in his early 40s and showing signs of serious neurological damage, they probably decided he was more trouble than he was worth. So they just dumped him," I said. "In some town near the oil fields, probably. Told him to get lost and never come back. That's when he ended up in that hospital he mentioned, beaten and robbed. The beating might have been their way of making sure he wouldn't try to come back." I thought about Wesley at 43, brain damaged and discarded like a broken tool, wandering into some small-town emergency room with no memory of how he'd gotten there. "The fact that he made his way to Dallas is actually encouraging," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "It suggests that somewhere in his damaged memory, he retained some sense of where he belonged. Dallas was familiar to him because he'd been there as a child. His brain was trying to guide him home." Wesley was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. "I'm not crazy," he whispered. "All those years, I thought I was crazy." "You're not crazy," I said, reaching across to squeeze his shoulder. You survived something that would have killed most people. You found your way back." Dr. Rodriguez nodded. What Wesley has been through, the trauma he's survived, it's beyond what most people can imagine. The fact that he's sitting here today, that he was able to piece together enough of his identity to find you, Marshall, that's not just survival. That's heroism. "So what now?" I asked. Can he get better?" "Recovery from this kind of trauma is possible, but it's a long process," she said. "Intensive therapy, medication for the anxiety and depression, possibly some cognitive rehabilitation to help with the memory issues. The VA has programs specifically designed for cases like this." "He wasn't in the military," I said. "No, but he's a victim of human trafficking, which qualifies him for certain services. And there are other resources, community organizations, support groups for trafficking survivors." She turned to Wesley. "You're not alone anymore. There are people who understand what you've been through." Wesley wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I want to try," he said. "I want to remember who I was, who I'm supposed to be." "It won't all come back," Dr. Rodriguez warned gently. "Some memories are lost forever, but you can build new ones. You can have a life." We left the clinic in silence. It was getting dark, and the Dallas skyline was lighting up against the evening sky. The traffic on I-35 was heavy, people heading home from work to their families, their normal lives. "Come home with me," I said as we stood on the sidewalk outside the clinic. "Come to Austin. Stay with Brooke and me. We have a guest house out back. You can have your own space, but you won't be alone. We can figure this out together." He looked at me, and I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear I'd seen that first morning at the shelter. "I don't know how to be someone's brother," he said. "I don't know how to be part of a family. I've been alone for so long." "So we'll learn," I said. "Both of us. We'll figure it out." "What if I can't? What if I'm too damaged?" "You're not damaged," I said firmly. "You're hurt. There's a difference. Hurt things can heal." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the traffic go by. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay, Marshall. I'll try." "That's all anyone can do," I said. "Try." We got in the truck and headed south toward Austin, toward home. Wesley fell asleep somewhere around Waco, his head against the passenger window. I drove through the darkness, thinking about all the years we'd lost and all the years we might still have. The radio played quietly, classic country, the kind of music Dad used to listen to when he worked in the garage. George Strait was singing about second chances, about finding your way back home. I reached over and turned up the volume just a little. Wesley stirred but didn't wake up. In the dashboard lights, I could see his face, relaxed for the first time since I'd met him. He looked younger somehow. He looked like my little brother. For the first time in 40 years, Wesley Davis was going home. We pulled into my driveway in Austin at 11:30 that night. The porch light was on, and I could see Brooke waiting behind the screen door. She'd been up worrying, probably pacing the kitchen and checking her phone every few minutes. Wesley stirred as I turned off the engine. He looked around, taking in the suburban neighborhood, the two-story house with its neat lawn and flower beds, the mailbox that said Davis in brass letters. "This is where you live?" he asked. "This is where we live," I corrected him. "For now, anyway." Brooke came down the steps as we got out of the truck. I'd called her from Dallas, explained everything. She'd cried on the phone, told me to bring him home. But seeing him in person was different. I could see her taking in his appearance, the weathered face, the clothes that had seen too many washings, the way he held himself like he was ready to run. She walked up to Wesley and stopped about 3 feet away. "Wesley," she said simply. "I'm Brooke. I'm so glad you're here." He looked at her uncertainly. "Marshall's wife?" "Yes. And your sister-in-law, I guess, though I never got to meet you before." She paused. "I'm sorry about that. About all of this." "It's not your fault," he said quietly. "No, but I'm still sorry it happened." She gestured toward the house. "Are you hungry? I made some food just in case." Wesley looked at me, and I nodded. "Brooke's cooking is the best thing about being married to her. Don't tell her I said that." "I heard you," Brooke said, but she was smiling. "Come on, both of you. Let's get some food in you." The kitchen smelled like cornbread and pot roast, the kind of meal Mom used to make on Sundays. Wesley stopped just inside the door, breathing deeply. "I know this smell," he said wonderingly. "I know this." "Cornbread," Brooke said, "with a little honey mixed in the batter. and pot roast with carrots and potatoes. Mom used to make this, Wesley said, looking at me. Didn't she? On Sundays after church? Every Sunday, I confirmed. You'd always ask for seconds, and she'd always say you were going to eat us out of house and home. Brooke had set the table for 3. Wesley sat down carefully, like he wasn't sure he belonged there. She served him a plate heaped with food, and he stared at it for a moment before picking up his fork. This is too much, he said. Eat what you can, Brooke said gently. The rest will keep. We ate mostly in silence. Wesley cleaned his plate, then looked longingly at what was left in the serving dishes. Have more, I said. There's plenty. I don't want to take too much. Wesley, Brooke said firmly, this is your home now. You don't take anything here. You belong here. He had seconds, then thirds. I watched him eat and remembered the skinny kid who could put away 2 helpings of everything and still ask what was for dessert. After dinner, I showed him the guest house. It was really just a converted garage, but it had a bed, a small bathroom, a kitchenette. Brooke had put fresh sheets on the bed and stocked the little refrigerator with water and snacks. It's not much, I said, but it's private. You can come and go as you please. Wesley stood in the middle of the room, turning slowly, taking it all in. The bed with its clean white sheets, the window with actual curtains, the small table with a lamp. I haven't had my own room since... He stopped, trying to remember. I don't think I've ever had my own room. Not that I can remember. Well, you do now, I said, for as long as you want it. He sat down heavily on the bed and put his head in his hands. Hey, I said, sitting down next to him. You okay? I don't know, he said. This is all so... normal. So nice. And I keep thinking I'm going to wake up back at the shelter, or sleeping under some bridge, and this will all have been a dream. It's not a dream, I said. You're here. You're safe. And tomorrow we're going to start figuring out how to help you remember more, how to get you the care you need. What if I can't? What if this is as good as it gets? What if I can't be the brother you remember? I thought about that for a moment. You know what? Maybe you can't. Maybe the Wesley I remember is gone, and that's okay. Because the Wesley sitting here right now, the one who survived 25 years of hell and still managed to find his way back to me, I like him pretty well too. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I want to remember, he said. I want to remember being your little brother. Maybe you will, I said, and maybe you won't. But either way, you're my brother. The DNA test proved that. Everything else, we'll figure out as we go. That night, I lay in bed next to Brooke, listening to the sounds of the house, the air conditioner cycling on and off, the old pipes settling, and somewhere out back, my brother breathing safely in his own room for the first time in 40 years. How are you doing? Brooke whispered in the darkness. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm happy he's alive. I'm grateful he found his way back. But I'm also angry as hell about what was done to him. And I'm scared that I won't be able to help him enough. You will, she said. We will. One day at a time. He's different, I said. He's not the kid I remember. Of course he's different. Look what he's been through. But he's still your brother. And he's still a good man. I can see it in his eyes. She was right. Despite everything he'd endured, there was still something gentle about Wesley. Something kind. Maybe that was what had kept him alive all these years. The essential goodness that no amount of trauma could completely destroy. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps on the back patio. I got up and looked out the window. Wesley was sitting on the steps of the guest house, looking up at the stars. Just sitting quietly, like he was trying to convince himself this was real. I put on my robe and went outside. Can't sleep? I asked. He shook his head. Too quiet. I'm used to... Well, shelters aren't quiet. Always someone coughing or talking in their sleep or getting up to use the bathroom. This is... He gestured at the peaceful backyard. This is like heaven. I sat down next to him on the steps. The night air was cool, and you could actually see stars despite the city lights. You remember looking at stars when you were a kid? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Maybe. Sometimes I think I remember lying on a blanket in the backyard, looking up. Was that real? Yeah, I said. Dad used to bring out this old army blanket and we'd lie on it and look for constellations. You were terrible at it. You'd point at random stars and make up your own constellations. The big sandwich. The flying pickup truck. Wesley smiled. That sounds like something I would do. You were about 8, maybe 9. Dad had just bought you a telescope for Christmas, and you were determined to find every planet in the solar system in one night. Did we? Nope. But we tried. Dad fell asleep on the blanket around midnight, and Mom had to come get us. We sat there in comfortable silence, 2 brothers under the same stars we'd looked at 30 years ago. Tomorrow would bring challenges, therapy appointments, medical tests, the long process of helping Wesley rebuild his life. But tonight, for the first time in 40 years, Wesley Davis was home where he belonged. The first few weeks were hard. Wesley would wake up screaming some nights, caught in nightmares about oil rigs and freezing buses and men who took his money and left him with nothing. Brooke and I would hear him through the thin walls of the guest house, but we learned not to rush over. He needed to know he was safe, but he also needed to feel like he had control over his own space. During the day, he'd sit on the back porch for hours, just watching the birds in Brooke's garden. He told me once that he'd forgotten what it was like to see something beautiful that nobody was trying to take away from him. I drove him to Dallas twice a week to see Dr. Rodriguez. The sessions were tough. She was helping him work through decades of trauma, piece together fragments of memory, learn to trust his own mind again. Some days he'd come out exhausted, wrung out from reliving things he'd tried to forget. Other days he'd be excited, having recovered some small piece of his past. I remembered the dog, he told me after one session, grinning like a kid. Ranger, the blue heeler. I remembered him bringing me a tennis ball and how he'd drop it right on my feet. He used to do that to everyone, I said, drive Mom crazy. She'd be hanging laundry and suddenly there'd be a slobbery tennis ball on her clean sheets. Was he a good dog? The best. You trained him to do tricks. Roll over, play dead, shake hands. You spent hours out in the backyard with him. These little memories were coming back more frequently now. Not the big things, not the trauma or the pain, but the small moments that made up a childhood. The taste of Mom's apple pie, the sound of Dad's laugh, the way the house smelled on Christmas morning. 3 weeks after he came home, my daughter Sarah drove down from Houston with her kids. She was nervous. I could tell by the way she kept fussing with her hair in the driveway, but she wanted to meet her uncle. Wesley was terrified. He'd spent so long around only broken people as damaged as he was, that the idea of meeting children made him panic. What if I scare them? He asked. What if I say something wrong? You won't, I said. Kids are tougher than you think. And these kids, they're good kids. They'll give you a chance. My grandson Tyler, who was 7, took to Wesley immediately. Maybe it was because Wesley didn't talk down to him, didn't treat him like a little kid. Tyler showed him his baseball card collection, and Wesley listened with the kind of attention that made Tyler feel like the most important person in the world. Uncle Wesley, Tyler said, and hearing that title made my chest tight. Do you want to play catch? I don't know if I remember how, Wesley said honestly. I can teach you, Tyler said with the confidence only a 7-year-old can have. So they went out in the backyard, and Tyler patiently showed his uncle how to throw and catch. Wesley was clumsy at first, missing easy tosses, throwing the ball too hard or not hard enough. But Tyler just kept retrieving the ball and encouraging him, and after an hour, Wesley was starting to remember. His body was remembering what his mind had forgotten. I think I used to be good at this, Wesley said, making a clean catch. Dad says you played baseball in high school, Tyler said. He says you were really good. Your dad remembers more about me than I do, Wesley said, but he was smiling. That night, after Sarah and the kids had gone home, Wesley sat with Brooke and me in the living room. It was the first time he'd come inside the main house after dark, the first time he'd felt comfortable enough to be part of the evening routine. Thank you, he said, for letting them come, for letting me be part of this. You don't have to thank us, Brooke said. You're family. This is where you belong. I don't know how to be family, he said. I don't know the rules. There aren't any rules, I said. We just show up for each other. That's all. A month after he arrived, Wesley got a part-time job at Home Depot. It was Dr. Rodriguez's suggestion, something to give him structure, purpose, a chance to be around people in a normal environment. The manager was a veteran himself, understood about PTSD and second chances. Wesley was good with the customers. Patient, helpful, never talked down to someone who didn't know the difference between a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver. His hands remembered tools even when his mind didn't remember much else. He'd come home with stories about his day. The old lady who needed help fixing her kitchen faucet. The young couple buying lumber for their first deck. Normal stories about normal people living normal lives. "I like helping people fix things," he told me one evening. "It feels right. Like maybe that's what I was supposed to be doing all along." "Maybe it is," I said. The nightmares were getting less frequent. Dr. Rodriguez had given him medication for the anxiety, taught him breathing techniques for when the memories got too overwhelming. He was learning to live with his damaged brain instead of fighting against it. 2 months in, he asked if he could have a garden. "Behind the guest house," he said. "Just a small one, maybe vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, stuff like that." "You remember liking to garden?" I asked. "No, but I like the idea of making things grow, of taking care of something and watching it get better." So we went to the garden center and bought seeds, soil, tools. Wesley spent hours back there, kneeling in the dirt, carefully planting rows of vegetables. Watching him work, I could see glimpses of the boy he'd been. Patient, gentle, hopeful. The garden grew, so did Wesley. He started reading again, slowly, with difficulty, but reading. Children's books at first, then young adult novels, gradually working his way back to an adult reading level. The library became one of his favorite places. Quiet, peaceful, full of knowledge that no one could take away. He joined a support group for trafficking survivors, met other people who'd lived through hell and made it out the other side. He didn't talk much in those meetings, but he listened. And sometimes, just being there was enough. 3 months after he came home, Wesley remembered Mom's birthday. "October 15th, he said suddenly over breakfast. Mom's birthday was October 15th. "Yeah," I said. "How did you remember that?" "I don't know. I was thinking about cake, and suddenly I could see her blowing out candles, a chocolate cake with white frosting. And she was wearing a blue dress." "Her favorite dress," I said. "She wore it every birthday." Wesley was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm sorry I missed so many of her birthdays." "She knew you didn't have a choice," I said. "She never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping you'd come home. I wish I could have told her I was okay." "You can tell her now," I said. "In your own way. She's listening." That afternoon, Wesley asked me to take him to the cemetery. We stood at Mom's grave, Margaret Davis, beloved wife and mother, and Wesley talked to her. Told her he was sorry he'd been gone so long. Told her about his garden, about Tyler, about learning to read again. Told her he was trying to be the son she'd raised him to be. I cried watching him. But they were good tears, healing tears. My brother was finding his way back, not to who he'd been. That boy was gone forever, but to who he was meant to be now. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. That was 6 months ago. It hasn't been easy. Wesley still has bad days. Days when the memories hit him like a freight train and he can barely get out of bed. Days when he's convinced that he's too damaged, too broken, too far gone to deserve the life he has now. Days when he wants to disappear back into the anonymity of the streets, because being nobody feels safer than being somebody's brother. But the good days outnumber the bad ones now. And on the good days, I can see glimpses of the boy I remember. Not the same boy. That kid is gone forever, and we've both accepted that. But someone new who carries pieces of that boy inside him. Wesley's garden is thriving. He's got tomatoes, peppers, squash, green beans. He spends hours out there every morning before work, talking to his plants like old friends. Tyler comes over on weekends to help, and Wesley is teaching him about soil and seeds and the patience it takes to watch something grow. "Plants don't care what happened to you before," Wesley told Tyler one Saturday morning. "They just care if you take care of them now." Smart kid that he is, Tyler nodded seriously. "That's like people too, isn't it, Uncle Wesley?" "Yeah, buddy. That's like people too." Wesley's reading level is up to high school now. He devours books about gardening, about animals, about healing. Last month, he started volunteering at the animal shelter, helping care for dogs and cats that have been abandoned or abused. Dr. Rodriguez says it's good therapy. Healing creatures helps heal the healer. They don't judge. he told me after his first day there. They just want someone to be kind to them. I understand that. My other kids have met him now. My son David drove down from Dallas with his family. My younger daughter Lisa came from San Antonio with her husband. It was awkward at first. How do you explain to your children that they have an uncle who's been presumed dead for 40 years? But kids adapt faster than adults. To them, Wesley is just Uncle Wesley, the quiet man who always has time to listen and never talks down to them. Wesley's been going to church with Brooke and me. Not because he's found God exactly, but because he likes the community, the ritual of sitting together in peace, the music that sometimes triggers memories of Sunday mornings from long ago. I think I remember singing hymns, he told me one Sunday, standing next to Mom, trying to match her voice. You were always off key, I said, but you sang loud anyway. Did it drive her crazy? Nope. She said it was the most beautiful sound in the world. The thing about grief is that it doesn't work the way you think it does. I spent 40 years grieving my brother, and now he's here. But I still feel the loss of who he was. I'm grieving for the 18-year-old who got on that bus. I'm grieving for the college student he never got to be, the veterinarian he never became, the wedding Mom never got to plan, the grandchildren she never got to spoil. But I'm also grateful, because he's alive. Against all odds, through everything, he survived. And maybe that's what matters most. Wesley asked me the other day if I ever blamed myself for identifying the wrong body. Every single day, I told him honestly. Every single day since you called me. Don't, he said. You were 25. You just lost your brother. You did the best you could with what you knew. I should have looked more carefully. If you had, they might never have found me. I might have died in those oil fields, working for whoever took me. At least this way, I'm here. I'm alive. And I have a brother who drove 3 hours in the middle of the night because a stranger said his name. He's right, I suppose. I'm trying to forgive myself. It's harder than it sounds. We talk about Mom a lot now. Wesley wants to know everything about her last years. What made her happy, what worried her, how she spent her days. I tell him about her book club, her garden club, the way she always kept his room exactly the same, how she'd talk to his picture every morning, updating him on family news like he might somehow hear her. Do you think she knows? He asked me last week as we sat on the back porch watching his tomatoes grow. Wherever she is, do you think she knows I'm alive? I think she does, I said. I think she's been watching over you this whole time, keeping you alive until you could find your way back. He smiled at that. It's still a rare thing, his smile, but it's getting more common. I'm glad you answered the phone, he said. Me too, Wesley. Me too. And I am. Despite everything, the pain, the confusion, the grief that somehow still exists alongside the joy, I'm grateful. Because my brother came back from the dead. And that's a miracle I never thought I'd see. I learned something through all of this. I learned that hope isn't foolish, even when it seems impossible. I learned that people are more resilient than we give them credit for. I learned that family isn't just about shared memories. It's about choosing to show up, day after day, even when it's hard. And I learned that it's never too late for a second chance. Wesley's still finding himself. He may never remember everything. He may always carry the scars of those lost years. But he's here. He's alive. He's home. Last night we sat on the deck after dinner and Wesley looked up at the stars. I remember now, he said quietly, lying on that old army blanket, making up constellations. The big sandwich, the flying pickup truck. You remember? Not everything, but pieces. Good pieces. He was quiet for a moment. Thank you for not giving up on me, for believing I could be saved. You saved yourself, I said. You found your way back. All I did was answer the phone. Yeah, he said, smiling up at the stars. But you answered. Tomorrow Wesley starts classes at the community college. Basic education, working toward his GED. Dr. Rodriguez thinks he might eventually be able to train as a veterinary assistant. It's not the life he planned at 18, but it's a life. A good life. A life worth living. Tonight, for the first time in 40 years, both Davis brothers are home where they belong. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.